thanks for tuning in to this broadcast of The Resilient Advisor. My name is Jay Coulter, and joining me today are two members of the Tematica research team, Chris Versace, a regular on this show, and for his first appearance is Mark Abssy. Guys, thanks for coming on. We're sitting here at the end of March. There's a lot going on. But before we get started, Mark, could you tell listeners a little bit about yourself, your background, and your role at Tematica?
Sure. So as Jay said, Mark Abssy from Tematica. Currently, I'm the head of indexing at Tematica, and I bring to them, I don't know, probably about a dozen or so years of index building. Most recently at the NYSE, and prior to that at an options exchange called the ISE. And so I've had opportunity to build some indexes for some pretty innovative thematic products over the years.
All right, Mark, stop right there. Stop right there.
Right.
Name some, don't be bashful. Name some tickers. People want to know.
Okay. So funds like FAN, funds like Sky, Hack, iPay, Big D, Gamer, CNCR. These are products that I've had the opportunity to either from whole cloth or, working with partners to build out the indexes and get these products launched. So
awesome. And where are you out of?
Currently in lovely Bergen County, New Jersey.
So how is the virus and this pandemic affecting your part of New Jersey? What's going on there today?
Well, school, this is the third week that my boys have been telecommuting to school. They're both in high school. So that's been going on. You may have seen the news over the weekend that the New Jersey governor announced a 90-day respite on mortgage payments. I'm not quite sure how that's going to work. I'll probably be reaching out to my lender later today on that. In terms of slice of life things, unfortunately, there was a gentleman who passed in our town a few days ago, unrelated to coronavirus. And he was a fixture in the town, had been here his whole life. And instead of townspeople attending the funeral, they did do a procession from the church to the funeral home by his house and by where the business that he had. And many townspeople actually came out and just stood in appropriately spaced groups along that route, just to pay their respects. So it's, kind of things like that, the differences between normal day life are, starting to pop up. So
yeah, that's interesting.
Yeah.
So I want to go back and let's do a little bit of a dive on the mortgage payment. But Chris, first, what's going on in your neck of the woods right now?
Yeah.
Oh, in terms of where I live and all that good stuff, you mean?
Yeah.
It's the usual stuff. I mean, everything is slow. People are cocooning. I think the dogs probably have never been in better shape in their lives from all the walking that they're doing. We're lucky that I think the weather here is starting to break a little bit. Today's going to be 65, sunny. I think people are going to do whatever they can to get back to work, whether it's, yard work or, whatever that they can do to resume that normal sense of life. I find it kind of a cruel trick that, we're seeing the number of cases ramp up, yet the days are getting longer, the weather is getting warmer, all that stuff is happening. The trees are blooming and you're kind of told, stay inside. So I have a little bit of problem with that.
Yeah, interesting. All right, so let's start talking about stuff that we're passionate about, the economy and investing. So let's start with the implications of a mortgage. What, a mortgage holiday? How are they, Mark, how are they going to position that, do you think?
Well, it's interesting because when you go to some of the lenders and look at what they do and how they process these types of things, the one thing that I read on my lender before Saturday's announcement was there's a forbearance and then there's basically modifying your mortgage, right? And it was kind of odd to me because the forbearance says, okay, we'll suspend payments for you, but once that suspension is over, you're required to make a lump sum payment of the payments you just made, which to me kind of seems to defeat the whole purpose of that. But what's interesting to me is that essentially we're going to have this huge wave of modifications. And I don't know what their criteria, what lenders' criteria is for modifications. If they're treating it as, okay, if we're modifying this, then there's a new credit score, there's a new set of circumstances. Are they essentially going to be renegotiating these mortgages, or are they strictly going to say, okay, your mortgage was for $300,000, you've paid down $100,000, so here's your new principal. We'll take a new prevailing rate, and maybe you're going to change the term.
Chris,
right?
what's your take?
And so there's lots of unknowns, right? So.
Well, I think we got to step back and, always ask the why. Why is this happening? And when we take a look at the number of companies that have shut their doors, the number of workers that are being furloughed, you're hearing about companies like Cheesecake Factory that said, hey, come April 1st, we can't pay our rent and we're furloughing. I think the number was something like, I'm probably going to get this wrong, but something like 87,000 workers across the country. So, as things absolutely staggering. And now we're hearing, this week that places like Disneyland, Disney World that had hoped to open, around April 18th, they're now going to be closed indefinitely. We're hearing companies like Ross Stores that are canceling purchase orders for merchandise through June. So there's a lot of, incremental adjustment that's going on to these views. And I think when we dial it down, consumers are going to be feeling the pain. And I think what we're seeing in the mortgage industry is, businesses are going to try and figure out some way to work around some of the hardship issues that are going to happen to save what they can. Do I think that that's the only thing we're going to see? No, I candidly, I expect more. I was going to bring this up later, but, the president's talking about maybe April 30th now. Meanwhile, the new FDA commissioner says that we're likely to see the peak in the U.S. for coronavirus cases and deaths probably in late April. He doesn't see social distancing being lifted perhaps to June. And again, this is the FDA commissioner. He's saying that the economy may not get back to normal to July, maybe August. So what we have is a continued reset down of expectations, for the economy, for businesses, and, implications that will continue to grow on workers and consumers.
So with that continued reset down, last week we saw one of the largest rises in the U.S. stock markets. Connect those two for us. Chris, why don't you start?
Well, what I would say is two things. Whenever we see a pronounced move lower, there are going to be days when the market does bounce higher. I think if we were to drill into it, we saw a lot of stimulus come on. The Fed continued to announce new initiatives. I also think the G20 said that they were going to pledge something like $5 trillion to do whatever it takes to stamp this out. And of course, here in the U.S., there was the $2.2 trillion fiscal stimulus. But again, I go back to my comments here that the expectations are this is going to continue and it's going to get worse in the near term, particularly the next 2 weeks in the U.S. And to me, it just raises the question as we're talking about mortgages and consumers and everything else. I think increasingly people will be asking, is 2.2 trillion enough? But I also want to pivot a little bit here because I know some of the work that Mark has done. And when we get back to talking about the market, he has crafted this wonderful attribution page, because when you talk about what's moving and what's higher, what's lower, we all see the same names that are moving. But I think the perspective that Mark has, and I think you have a chart of this, Jay, I think it's really quite elaborating, because remember, despite the big move last week, the major indices, coming into today were down anywhere from 13 to 32%, depending on what they were for the quarter.
Yeah, and then, further picking up on what Chris said, minus my boot polishing. If you look at what ran last week, these 30% gainers, 50% gainers, I mean, these are the guys that were down 70, 80% prior. So, some of the financials that are out there, some of the discretionary names, right? Marathon Petroleum up 39% last week. Cisco Corp, not the food people, also up again 39%. Valero, L Brands, these guys were all popping, not because of any particular upswing in their sales or reported or earnings or anything like that. It's just the fact that they were just beat down like crazy, and so and when you look at some of these names up here, these are actually, at least the ones on top, are the actual relative winners. right? So, and when you look again, if I run this from 219 to Friday, right, and I sort, we've got, let's see, we've got 8 names that are positive over that time. Only 3 of them, three of those names are only up like 30 or 40 basis points, right? So
and Mark, who are those? Yeah. Who are those?
Yeah. Okay. So the kind of top 6 or the top 5, Citrix Systems, the tech company, up 14.5%. Regeneron, Gilead, not surprising, 12 and 8%. Clorox has been strong throughout. And believe it or not, Cabot, oil and gas. And despite what's been happening in the oil markets, natural gas is actually not doing badly, believe it or not. And so, no, really, because if you look at it here, natural gas, the 1 month for natural gas is only down 2% versus WTI at 58% down.
So Chris,
yeah, which I think that crossed $20 this morning, right? And we're starting to see CapEx plans get cut and some dividends get cut in the oil patch. Sorry, Jay.
Yeah, no, Chris, let's go deep on some of these names here, because our audience likes to talk about them. And Mark has Disney up here down 31%. He has Applied Materials down 33%. What on this list? And for podcast listeners, I'll put a link to this in the show notes. It's a really impressive list with a lot of carnage. What stands out to you, Chris?
Well, I think if we were to, bifurcate the list into 2 groups, the top and then the bottom, let's deal with the top first, right? So you got Amazon, Costco, Walmart, Kroger, and the like. And when you think about some of these names, these are the ones who are benefiting from what's happening. We are hearing that Amazon is starting to do temperature testing at its warehouses, but unlike the carnage that we're hearing for closures and furloughs in retail land, Amazon is looking to hire people. I think last I saw, they're looking to hire 100,000 people. And it speaks to the accelerated shift that the pandemic is going to have on digital commerce, which is, of course, in line with our digital lifestyle investing theme. Costco, Walmart, people have to eat. Kroger the same way. I do think Walmart, when we look at that and you see it's down, less than Amazon, less than Costco, I think it speaks to the pull forward that we saw early on as people were going to buy, whatever they can get their hands on, whether it was toilet paper, paper towels, cleaning supplies, as Mark noted with Clorox, or just regular, food that they could hole up with. Same thing with Kroger. McCormick's, I like that. People are going to be eating at home a little more, allspice marinades and things like that. And then we kind of wade into these inelastic companies. I say that because no matter what's going on, Jay, and I'm going to put this to you, you're not going to cancel your home alarm system. You're not going to cancel your cell service, and your garbage is going to continue to be picked up. And you're probably going to still sit at home and watch Netflix like everybody else, starting like we did last night with Tiger King.
Yes, we finished the whole thing this weekend, my wife and I. But that actually was the question that I had for you today, Chris. So I'm already
97% score. I got to tell you, that is the craziest show I've ever seen, because you watch an episode and you're like, it can't get any crazier. And it does.
It does. Yeah. So along those lines, here was my thought after we finished the Tiger King last night. I thought, this is great. Netflix is probably, their subscribers have to be up. Their revenues have to be up. The minute I can get out of my house and go to a baseball game, I'm canceling Netflix. It's gone. I will have watched everything. And you have to think there has to be some trend along those lines. And then my second question is Verizon. So I got my Verizon bill and I sign up for auto pay. The bill came through. I travel a lot professionally in normal times. So I have the full data plan. Well, I'm turning that sucker off because I'm not leaving the house. Everything's on the Wi-Fi network now. So isn't there going to be some demand pull forward for some companies, and then some of that?
Well,
I'm not so sure. I would say that's demand pull forward, right? I think that
for Netflix.
Right. Well, I have a little bit of a different concern with Netflix, which is, we're hearing that the coronavirus is shutting down a lot of film and TV production, right? So I think that you're onto something where we're going to consume a lot of the fresh content, and then there's going to be older content that will have to satiate our demands while we're still cocooning. Hopefully not, but if we are. And then at some point, there's going to be this another wave of new content as all these things start coming back on. So yeah, I think people won't cancel. I think they might put it to the side and then be like, oh, all this other stuff is coming.
Got it.
That's what I think there. And the same thing true with Verizon. Sorry, Mark, is that, yes, everybody is sucking Wi-Fi, right? But two thoughts. One, you might turn around and go, holy crap, if this is going to continue, I got to up my megabits per second because I'm choking here from everything and all the consumption in my house. That would be a positive, right, for Verizon. And the second thing is, at some point, life will get back to normal. And these devices, will probably once again take over chewing through mobile data. So I'm not so sure that people are going to cancel that, Jay. You might be an outlier.
Well, the one thing that I'll say to kind of counterpoint on that, though, is that when people look at their overall kind of infotainment bill, right, and you're looking at, say, a Verizon or a Comcast or whomever, the telephone, the TV, and the internet. I mean, here in northern New Jersey, that's easily a $200 a month bill. Right. You can take that down to just internet for $80. And by the way, when you have just internet, there are no additional line fees, other fees, etc. It's just
taxes.
Like yeah. So even if you do that and you say, you know what, but I do want Hulu. I mean, we have Hulu and we have live TV and no ads and the DVR and HBO, and that's like $85, right? So even if you and as far as a landline goes, I don't know. I mean, before we got rid of our landline,
who has a landline? Who
exactly
has a landline? Exactly.
Even people as old as me. But So I mean, net. The savings, it's 140 versus 200. It's $60 a month, right? Now there are folks who will say, okay, I'm gonna cut the cord, and then they run out and they get, Super Test Hulu, and they get Disney Plus, and they get Netflix, and they end up paying at least as much or perhaps even more. But you got to be smart about what you're doing. So.
Yeah, we used to have a theme that we folded into digital lifestyle, which was content is king. And historically, people move for good content. Netflix first saw that with House of Cards, then with Stranger Things, HBO, obviously, with Game of Thrones. And I would argue now, once again, with Westworld, but hey, that's me. I think Netflix is seeing a resurgence with Tiger King and some other programming. To me, those are the big ones. Apple, For All Mankind is pretty good. I liked it, but they need more. And I think that, Amazon Prime really needs to get its acting gear in terms of video.
Yeah, I mean, the one thing that could mitigate the kind of the content drought is basically firms stepping away from binge release and going back to a weekly format or some other format. I know, easy.
What?
Respect. But if it really, I mean, because
I'm not going to let you back on this show if you start talking about that again. That would be awful. Talk about going backwards.
We don't encourage. We're forward thinking here. We don't encourage that behavior.
All right. Okay, tough guy. All right. But seriously, I mean, if Netflix is saying, okay, we've suspended production, or if everyone's saying we've suspended production, and we don't know when that window is, right? I mean, I don't know.
All kidding aside, I think it's a fair point because, just to circle back to what you were saying, Jay, I could binge everything and then quit, right? To the extent that they have, they adopt the model like HBO does with Westworld or even Game of Thrones, where they dribble the episodes out. You have to stick around for that period of time. Would I personally be a fan of it? No, but does it make a business case? Yeah.
But is there not a point where people just say, you know what, my eyeballs can only take so much, right? And this is part of the conversation that I had with my wife when my boys were starting to get into video games, and her concern was, oh my God, that's all they're doing is video games. And I said, look, treat it like you treat Halloween candy, Okay. Let them binge and let them do and let them burn themselves out. And then they'll get over it and they will self-moderate. And if you take it and you say, no, 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 that's bad, or you got to restrict this, then it becomes this thing that everybody needs and everybody wants, right?
Yeah. See, I would have used I would have used the drinking age instead of candy, but whatever.
Yeah, but I grew up in Canada, so we don't have those hangups. So,
All right, guys, new topic here. Let's talk about something I'm concerned about that I know you guys expressed to me in an email last night, and that's this middle class squeeze that's coming. It looks like you were providing some resources for folks at the end. Yeah, fine. You're right, Mark. It's here, but it's just going to manifest itself in this seemingly very awful way over the next 90 to 120 days.
Yeah, I mean, it gets back to what we were chatting about earlier. Where we. Companies are trying to, save their businesses to the best they can, and that means that they're, shutting their doors, furloughing workers. If you're restaurants, like by me, most of them have fired their employees. They want to help them get onto the expanded unemployment claims as fast as they can, but they're operating on a skeleton basis, really trying to survive on takeout, or actually not even takeout. Sorry, curbside pickup. I went to get sushi the other night and they wouldn't let me anywhere near the door. They actually brought everything out, including the receipt to the car. So, it's going to be tough. And again, I think the longer this goes on, the harder it's going to get on businesses, which means it's going to get harder on workers. So what do we know about these workers? The average credit card debt is around somewhere between $6,000, $6,500. We know that the median income in the U.S. is around $32,000, $34,000. Do the math. If you're one of those, folks that gets laid off, maybe you get some help with the stimulus package. You get a little bit of help with the unemployment claims. But if you look at your monthly bills, odds are you're going to fall short or fall behind. And yes, you might get some relief on the mortgage. You might get some relief on credit cards or some other things from banks and other financial institutions. But you are going to be pinching your pennies where you can. I hate to say it, it's that simple.
Man, I mean, for what it's worth, our credit card bills, family of four, Bergen County, kids in high school, they've been more than cut in half in the last month or so, just because we're not going out. Yeah, to the point we talked about earlier. Yeah, we're still paying Verizon and we're still paying PSE&G and we're still paying, the mortgage and all that kind of stuff. But in terms of the rest of it, even it's funny. I noticed actually my wife sent an email to the mayor saying, "Hey, why are we still having trash pickup twice a week? Because these barrels are less than half full. Let's just cut it down to once a week." Right now, municipalities being municipalities, those are multi-year contracts, and it's not going to save anybody any money. But the point is that that's spending. That's your reduced spending right there. Right. Yeah. Full trash bins versus not full trash bins.
Well, and the other part too is, I mentioned about Amazon and hiring workers and, the shift to digital shopping. You are seeing things take, for the most part, a lot longer, or at least they are saying they're indicating delivery times that are a lot longer, telling you that the system is a little bit strapped. So I think that too could restrain some of the spending shift that we're seeing as well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah.
Let's wrap this up by putting a thematic lens on what you see today for folks that are constructing portfolios or looking at risk in portfolios. What is one of your top takes right now, given where we are?
Well, there are the obvious ones that we hinted at, digital lifestyle, middle class squeeze. But I think there's one that we haven't touched on that is probably one that a lot of people are not thinking about. And I think that it's something that, when we look back on this in hindsight, in 3 months, 6 months from now, there's going to be a lot of data, again, backward-looking data that proves this out. And I'm going to hand the reins to Mark so he can really dig into this. But Mark, cybersecurity and data privacy.
Yeah, as Chris said, cybersecurity has been something that's been top of mind pretty much up until the last month or so. Data privacy in the States, of course, has been becoming more of an issue. In Europe, there, of course, is GDPR legislation that was passed as we know by the headlines of Facebook being sued and Google being sued and everybody being sued because of client data management. These are pretty big issues, and they raise some pretty big questions. When you look at those companies again, on the data security side, on the cybersecurity side, that's pretty cut and dry, right? People are either being defensive or in some cases offensive in terms of cybersecurity. On the data privacy side, that's a little more squishy and a little tougher to nail down. But you can look at companies and look at their policies and how they deal with their clients' data, how they interact with governments, how they interact with other officials, and you get a sense of kind of where their priorities are, right?
Yeah,
Apple, of course, is the name that comes to mind. There's been several high-profile cases the last few years about what they've done about their device security, their customers' data, and those kinds of things.
And that's one of the reasons we like Norton LifeLock. And this really speaks to the Foxberry Tematica Research Cybersecurity and Data Privacy Index that we created. And not to plug too hard, but if you're a listener in the UK, Italy, or Germany, take a look at the RISE ETF that's built on this index. And I think one of the things, just to, we always, one of the reasons we like thematics is that they're signposts in everyday life, right? And we are home a lot more, as we've been talking about, chewing through a lot more bandwidth, spending a lot more time online. And, there was this one article that, I'm just going to read it. Cyber criminals are taking advantage of the increasing amount of time that people spend online due to new measures taken by member states to spread the coronavirus. Mm-hmm. Right? So this is coming out of the European Commission. A week or so ago, the WHO said that, hey, there are nefarious actors who are spoofing their emails out to individuals, and we're going to see more of that. The one downside of this is that these bad actors, when there's a disruption going on, they love to capitalize on it. And the one thing, just to connect the dots between something Mark was saying between cybersecurity and data privacy, is you can almost think that these GDPR violations, these CCPA in California and other privacy regulations that are coming through, they almost can, they might have had a mindset change in the attackers. From their perspective, I can destroy a company, right?
It's almost
because
like
of the fines that they will have to
pay.
Yeah, exactly.
These regulations almost weaponize these attacks further, because what ends up happening is that I'm a hacker, I attack a company, I get their data, great, maybe I hold them for ransom. But now I can, by extension, have the government institute penalties, severe penalties, on these companies for having, lax security around customer data. So whereas I may go and say, I'm gonna hold your data ransom for 1,000 Bitcoin or whatever it is, the government comes out and says, you know what, your fine is $1,000 per client, per customer. And I just pull down some bank's, 300,000 client list.
Think about that. That's why on that list of stocks you had, Jay, there was Norton LifeLock. That's why that's there.
Excellent. Well, Chris, Mark, I appreciate you guys coming on to share your expertise. For more information about Tematica Research and the team, please visit tematicaresearch.com. Gentlemen, it's going to be an interesting week. We'll talk to you next time.
You got it. Thanks, Jay.